What's up guys, Jimmy here. We are back with another old school RuneScape video. We are going to be covering sailing, in particular the Sailing 1 poll. Now there's going to be 3 of these polls that are going to be coming out, and it looks like there's a bit of promising content here. We have kind of broken down like the whole thing of what's involved, but just to kind of give a quick introduction, we plan on doing the sailing race when the skill launches, probably on a hardcore Ironman. We are kind of going for that like 200 mil leaderboard lock-in, so I'm looking at like everything related to sailing. Pretty much everything in this video is speculative and subject to change. There's a couple things they said are definitely locked in, but we're just kind of going through some of the information because anything that's kind of being built in, anything they're cooking in, you know, these systems might make it into release, they might not, but having the context may help, especially if we want to be competitive later down the road. So without further ado, I think we can kind of dive in. So if you look at the introduction here, they kind of lay out the plan. You know, there's going to be 3 polls. The first one is for the questing, the area expansions, and this new hybrid fishing sailing activity called deep sea trawling, which honestly looks pretty cool. I'm not super sure how relevant it'll be for like training competitively, but it looks like really laid back and kind of like an awesome skilling method. They do talk about skilling content and resources, and then the creatures and unique rewards. So they've laid out like a really complex roadmap here. We did the sailing alpha. I was not personally in the beta, so I don't know exactly what was in that, like, you know, before the NDA lifted and stuff like that. But if you see here, you can see the Great Conch Island. That's essentially what is going to be the like main sailing island. If you had to like map a place to the skill, it's probably like your central hub, if you will. Like Pandemonium is existing for low levels, but I think Great Conch is kind of like more like the Prift style type of like skilling hub where you're going to be like rebasing. I'm guessing we'll kind of get into like the layout of everything later, but the Tortugan questline, these guys are like the turtle species. They hang out on the Great Conch, and once you do that first quest, it's going to unlock there. They talk about these small scale sailing related quests. Now, those don't give a ton of XP. We'll get into the rewards in just a moment. And then the deep sea trawling activities. So these are the first poll. The second poll is literally all about your skilling methods. So woodcutting, mining, fishing. It's mostly just about like resource nodes and like how they're being laid out on islands. You have some discussion about hunter, like there's like these crabs, farming, thieving, construction. Construction makes a lot of sense, like all the planks, but you can see like there's more NPCs to thieve, and like there's coral farming, which is like, you know, some like underwater farming patches. They call them like nurseries. So you're just like taking care of another patch. It's like, okay. I think as the world expands, this stuff kind of makes sense to me. I don't know why people would really reject it. Nobody wants dead content, and nobody wants dead islands that are just like full of absolutely nothing. Like, that's not fun. So if they're going to add the content, as long as it's being balanced, I think this is pretty straightforward stuff, right? The crafting, fletching, cooking, and herb lore. Herb lore looks like it could have some pretty big impacts if they go forward with some of the fishing changes. So this trawling method might create like a new resource that's used in other skills as well, like cooking and maybe herb lore. So I'm curious about like the impact for Ironman, but I think more of that's going to unravel later. And then finally, the last poll is about combat. I think this is like the make or break for the entire skill. I think I speak for everyone when I say like we all want combat to be really good. We want it to be balanced. Most people who actually want sailing, like I think they're actually really excited for the idea of like ship combat. So we want it to be good, and we haven't really seen it yet. We've seen a couple like small clips here and there, but we haven't quite seen like the big kahuna, like the big battle, the big kraken, like the PvP, which might come down the road after release. Like those are the things that could make the skill actually enjoyable for like an extended period of time, and not just for like a race in the beginning or like the first time you kill the boss, right? Balancing all the loot and what you get from these activities and how the skill actually progresses and scales as you get to like, you know, the 90s, what they choose to provide for the players, I think is very important. So we'll have to see just how this all transpires. The Great Conch, I think they talk about the skilling. I'm not really going to get into this more than I just did. The island layout, the conch is kind of in that like southern part here. We have like the map open, but the Great Conch is down kind of southeast of Pandemonium. This is called, I think, the Ardent Sea, and then you have the Unquiet Sea, Unquiet Ocean down here. We'll get into like the ocean layout because that's like another part of this. But it's a pretty massive island. Like if you look at Pandemonium as like your starter island, like, you know, this still took like a little bit to run around, right? Like these are massive continents. So the Great Conch is extremely large. I think it's much larger than, you know, it kind of like looks on this little map. Like you can zoom out here. Okay, there's like there's Lumbridge, you know, like this is basically the size of I don't know, it's like a half of Asgarnia basically, right? Like it's not a joke. So anyway, they mentioned some new trees, that crab, the farming. The quest line is relevant, right? This is impactful because the main two things here are you have two starter quests or like intermediate quests, whatever you want to call them. They both require like really low skills. I think I want to say like 51 on one of the highest skill requirements. But the important notes to take away are that the first quest, Troubled Tortugans, that requires 45 sailing. And it's going to give us 10,000 sailing XP. So like you can look at your curves, like everyone's kind of been looking at, okay, well, they're giving us all this XP and like one big jump for our first completion of those time trials. Now, we did the Marlin run before. We've kind of done the ringer there. It's very curious to see if we're going to have more of those races out there. If we're looking at like really being competitive with sailing, like you should try and think of like, okay, once you at level 30, you need to hit Marlin as soon as you can for like, you know, the full amount of XP. And that'll push you to like, you know, maybe it's 41 or so. And then you're going to go to like this second Barracuda time trial. And that one, you're going to go, okay, that's going to get me up to 47. And then we're going to try and like two tick from 47 to 50 to do this next quest. So like Red Reef actually requires 52 sailing. The highest skill requirement on that one is only 48 smithing. Well, other than the sailing, of course. That gives you 15,000 sailing XP, which is actually pretty serious. So between those two quests, at least what's being proposed today, we're looking at 25,000 XP total, which isn't a massive amount, but it's probably worth doing, especially if there's going to be unlocks, considering we know that Troubled Tortugans will actually unlock the Great Conch. So maybe it's skilling activities, maybe it's just sailing related. We're not really sure. But then for the Red Reef, it looks like they say like it might have access to free resources. A lot of this still is subject to polling. So I think we're going to be seeing more details as these things transpire. Moving on, I think what's probably the most important to get to next, we have this view of the islands here. So just some quick discussion about like the islands and geography, kind of moving into the third part of this video. If you look at the layouts here, these islands are actually like super small. And they've talked about how when we were in the alpha, you know, we had this access to about maybe 1/8 or so, 1/9 of the total ocean like area. And that area is not really representative of a sailing skill. Like a lot of those islands didn't have all the nodes that they will have. You could get onto them much earlier than you possibly will actually be able to once the skill releases. Very interestingly, they're saying that a lot of the content just wasn't balanced. And there was like a lot of people who said like they wanted to see more landmarks. So it sounds like they're going to be adding more smaller islands in the open ocean so that you're not just like constantly having like these dead periods where it's like you know, where am I at? Like everything kind of looks the same. Like nobody wants to experience that. Another cool part I want to comment on is that they mentioned that they're aware of community interest in procedurally generated islands by an algorithm, much like the rooms of the Gauntlet. I think like this concept is actually crazy, like how that would work, especially if you have like multiple people in like a non-instanced world, because we know that like even looking back to Reddit posts, like they're very against the idea of making any of this instanced content. So I don't know, maybe like for bosses and stuff like that, they might actually open that door. We haven't really seen like the combat side of everything, so I do want to kind of keep a radar on for this, but we're still excited. They've mentioned that there might be some quick travel here, like some fast travel. Teleport to boat seems like it's confirmed here. They do go into like more depth with like the different ocean difficulties. This map is very complicated, but we know like the Storm Tempor, which is around Temporos Cove, that had like a mid-level hull or low-level hull requirement for your boat. So they're going to be doing like some advanced seas. You can see like these darker blue shades. They're actually making this Untamed Seas. I think it's called Untamed Ocean in the northeast. That looks absolutely scary. Like it's around like, you know, deep wilderness and like Mauritania. So you can only imagine like this is probably like your end game area, but that's actually not going to be in game at launch is what I understood from this article. There's going to be all these different storm areas, so maybe you'll have like different requirements based on like, you know, what your upgraded hull is and what you're trying to get to, where you're trying to go. So hopefully we have an idea of like what that's going to look like long term. Beyond this, I think most of it's pretty straightforward. These maps, they're providing tons of new information for us. I tried finding like if there were more Barracuda time trials on this humongous map. Like you can look at Pandemonium. We know that Storm Temper, once you got access here, you could get into this first time trial. It sounds like there's going to be like, I want to say like 5 or 6 based on our previous video that we did. We're expecting more of these time trials. So the more that there are, like those are more one-off rewards that you can get. So very likely you'll be like doing a bunch of skilling, hitting that time trial, doing more skilling, get to that quest and keep pushing onward, right? So I couldn't find any though. I was curious if like they were going to show us where they might be, but wasn't able to find anything. It's a cool map, but the main takeaway here that they did confirm is that there are only going to be the Ardent, Unquiet, Shrouded, Part of the Sunset, Western, and Northern at release. So these will be the oceans that are available. It seems like the Untamed, the Eastern, the Forgotten Ocean, which is like on the west side of, Varlamore and Zia. So it's going to be probably, maybe it's later, maybe it's expansion content, maybe it's going to be tied to like some raid in the future. They're keeping a lot of this kind of unreleased. It sounds like if we're going to be pushing to 200 mil at launch, it might be really hard because maybe some of the XP methods will cap out, with the idea that like they're going to make it a little easier. Like they're building in some power creep almost, just to account for all the people who are going to go super, super hard like the first 3 to 6 months. I mean, this game's never had a new skill before, and we only can guess what it's going to be like. So the last thing we'll cover here in the video, they mentioned this hybrid skilling method. I'll quickly touch on it, but it involves like tracking down a shoal of fish. So you have 3 different facility types. You have a sonar orb, a chum bucket, and a trawling net. The net is going to help you, get fish at like a better rate. It basically is what you can't gather at sea without this net. There's a chum bucket, which is going to more or less multiply the sustenance that you're able to do. So if you go to a particular node that you've found, which is done with the sonar orb, the 3rd facility. So you find these shoals of fish, you then release this net, right? And then you're using your chum bucket, which helps you kind of like get more resources out of it. So upgrading your trawling net and your chum bucket will help you like be more efficient once you found a node. And there's like higher tiers and like deeper shoals and things like that. And they mentioned like there's some impact on cooking and also herb lore. We're not really super concerned with the hybrids because they're probably not that worth it for us, but I wanted to make sure we touched on it because it sounds like an awesome method. Maybe after I get my sailing cape, we'll just be chilling and like hanging out doing some multi-skilling. But yeah, that's it, guys. I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the video here. I'm gonna be racing this skill like a madman. We're gonna try and do like 18-hour days, or maybe 19, maybe 20, depending on like, I'm trying to get my physical fitness back to a good place before this comes out. So I've been like taking care of myself, getting better rest and exercise, and honestly we've been doing pretty good the past couple months. So I'm super stoked, and I hope you guys join me in the skilling release. We're gonna have an absolute blast regardless of whether the skill is good or not for the game, which we hope it is. But as always, I always love gaming with you guys, and have a great rest of your day and take it easy. Catch you in the next one.